Good morning from WKYT News. I'm Bill Bryant, and we hope you have enjoyed your Thanksgiving weekend. We welcome you to Kentucky Newsmakers. Later, WKYT Chief Meteorologist Chris Bailey will join me. He'll be talking about his winter weather outlook, including why he has reached the conclusions that he has about the season to come. That's in just a few minutes. But first, Lexington Mayor Jim Gray is here. He's fresh off the experience of running his first statewide campaign. Mayor Gray is also getting ready to lead Lexington through the holiday season, while also dealing with some serious matters at City Hall. Gun violence has shattered the peace in many neighborhoods and has even brought concerns to some school campuses. There is progress at Centerpoint. That project that started in 2008, now said to be up for completion a decade later in 2018. We'll ask the mayor what he's hearing there. The mayor also continues to scope out possible locations for a new City Hall. Lexington Mayor Jim Gray joining us today. We'll also get to the new Senior Citizen Center and the old courthouse renovations. Mayor, thank you for coming. We appreciate it very much.
Great to be with you, Bill, again.
Well, let's talk a little bit about the Senate race and your experience there before we talk about what's going on in town. You worked hard, came up short in your first run for statewide office. What did you learn in that U.S. Senate campaign? Well,
Bill, it sort of confirmed what I've always said, that you got to play to win, but not be afraid to lose. And we got 813,222 votes, but who's counting, I say. And, you know, really proud of that. And I learned so much going across our state. It really took me back years when I was in our family's construction business, and we did work all over the state. So I got to meet a lot of people, and I got to hear about their issues and their concerns, and that was really rewarding in so many respects.
What did people generally tell you about, and could you feel the direction that the election was going as you heard the issues discussed?
Well, pocketbook issues, really. Economic issues was what most people were interested in. And, you know, I was proud that so many people look up to Lexington and what we've done in Lexington, the way that we've addressed a lot of the problems in Lexington, and the pride that we have in being, for example, named the 6th best run city in America. And all across the state, people would say, you know, if I didn't live in Harlan or Hazard or Paducah, you know, I might take Lexington as a second home.
Are you surprised by the challenge that Kentucky Democrats face when you go outside the metropolitan areas? You know, you did very well in Lexington and Louisville, carried some other counties, more counties than the presidential nominee did on the Democratic side. But you face really a howling wind of opposition in rural areas, right, as a Democratic candidate, or did this year?
Well, it's a challenge, you know, and Republicans had done an effective job of illustrating, for example, that the solution is to continue talking about the war on coal rather than actually resolving those issues. But we were very proud that we competed in all 120 counties. And we actually did better than the Democratic presidential nominee, Hillary Clinton. We did 30% better, or 10 points better than Hillary did. So, you know, as you said, my first statewide race, and I was very proud of what we did and how we performed and what I learned in it.
Some might be surprised by your upbeat nature after that campaign, having lost by double digits in a Senate race, but you have pronounced it, as you say, a learning experience for yourself and really a success as far as a campaign as much as it could be.
Well, as I learned in business that you can't win every project that you're chasing. I learned that in our construction business. We'd often chase a customer for a year or longer, and that's the way that I was running this campaign. We always knew that it was going to be uphill and it'd be challenging, but I like a challenge. I've always embraced challenges, and so this was one that I embraced wholeheartedly.
Are you still chasing customers? In other words, does this tempt you to look at another potential statewide race?
Well, I've said, you know, you never say never, but I will tell you, Bill, that I say routinely that this job as mayor, even on a bad day, it's a great job. And I was right back to work as mayor. Been in this job, of course, the whole time I was in the campaign, but I was right back. People said, you know, are you going to take a vacation? No, I was right back at my desk the next day.
You have not said whether you're eligible for, we know you're eligible for a third term. You have not said whether you will seek it in 2018. Are you prepared to say that now?
Well, what I've said is that this job is very compelling. I'm not going to speculate right now. That's what I'm going to do now is be very vigorously engaged, of course, with this job, as I always have been. There are so many projects that we have here in Lexington to address and deal with. Initiatives, we've got challenges, and we're going to talk about those as we go in this program.
Was it a challenge to keep tabs on what was happening at City Hall while you ran that statewide campaign?
Well, I've always been able to. Somebody said that I'm pretty good at multitasking, and so it was a bit of a challenge. But we've got great people in Lexington's city government, and I'm very proud of the work that we do every day.
We have seen neighborhoods, parks, even some schools impacted, Mayor, by gun violence in recent months. Many say more needs to be done to try to make Lexington safer. Trinity Gay being caught in crossfire and other shootings have rattled many
Yes,
in the community. Right. How is the city responding?
Well, any incident, any tragic or horrific incident like these that you've just described is one too many. And we can't be complacent. We have to work toward continuous improvement every day. I'm in conversations, and our police chief is in conversations, and our police and our public safety commissioner in conversations with the superintendent, Manny Kalk, and at the Fayette Urban Schools and Urban County Schools, the Lexington Fayette Urban County Schools. And Manny is doing a great job, and he's very committed to resolving and to facing these issues head on. And that's exactly what he's doing. This is why we're having the conversations with them. And we want to do anything we can, everything we can as a city to support our school system. The schools are, of course, independent of the city, but we must work together, and that's exactly what we're doing. So we're going to be focusing on prevention, education, and intervention. And what Manny has said to me is there's a great concern about truancy levels in some of our schools. And those truancy levels may be part of the systemic issue or the root cause of some of the gun incidents. And so addressing this in a vigorous way, in a constructive way, is what we're committed to.
Mayors, you know, some who have gotten in trouble for having guns at school, Tates Creek High School in particular, have said it was because of issues in their neighborhood that is the reason that they brought the guns to class.
Well, what we know, Bill, is that this is a societal issue across the entire country. And dealing with and addressing these issues, you know, working with our social service agencies, working through the social service agencies with parents, and encouraging parenting in a vigorous way. If there's anything that we can do, this is what we're looking at. We're saying we're not going to accept what's being done today if we're not achieving the results that we need to do, and that is creating a safe environment for our kids.
Is there enough dialogue, do you think, between neighborhoods and the city or the schools, or is there just enough talk going on about what's happening?
I think that our community policing effort is recognized across the country. Lexington's community policing efforts are recognized across the country as some of the best in the country. And Lexington, even with these horrific incidents and tragic incidents, we are still recognized as the safest city in the country for a city our size. And we've got to not accept, though, any level of incident. We've got to work vigorously. We've got to work as a community and working together. And this is what I think that we're really very good at, pulling together when we have the opportunity for improvement, pulling together and working to resolve issues.
Do you support the use of metal detectors at high schools?
I think, you know, this is of course up to the school system, but I support whatever decisions that the superintendent is making because he's doing a great job.
There is some visible progress at Centerpoint project. Now, WKYT, we keep a camera trained there at all times, and we've seen some activity there. What is your understanding, Mayor, about where things stand now? This is a project that started in 2008. When you first became mayor, you were raising concerns about this in that first campaign, right?
When I was vice mayor.
Vice mayor,
yeah,
right.
A little earlier.
Right, but 2010 you ran for mayor.
Well, if we look at the history of Centerpoint, it's not unlike other projects across the country that were created or developed and started right before the recession hit us, the Great Recession hit us. So that's really what, that was really at the center of the problems associated with the project. It was just, it started at a really tough time. And that was what I cautioned about. But nevertheless, what the city wants to do is work with developers to execute and to implement projects. Now, what's going on today is frankly very encouraging. Now, I've come from the construction business, done it all my life. And so when I see the columns going up, when I see reinforcing steel at the site, when I see the concrete being placed, poured, then that is very encouraging, because that means that this parking garage is underway today, and it's underway in a very effective way. As
recently as a couple of weeks ago, the developers requested a change from the oversight committee that oversees that,
right,
that area, and they were requesting the ability to potentially change the number of floors and maybe a little bit of the design of the building. What kind of signal does that give you as a construction person?
Well, that's actually normal.
Okay.
That's normal in a project of this size, because they're going to be responding to market conditions, and the market conditions have adjusted and changed over time. So it's not unexpected that they would go to the Courthouse Area Design Review Board for permission to make some adjustments.
Do you continue to look for a potential new venue for City Hall?
Actually, we are doing that, Bill, and the reason for that is that we're just the existing building, built more than 100 years ago, is just hemorrhaging, and it's extraordinarily costly. It's costing 3 times what it should cost to keep a new building up, to maintain a new building. So, and we've got to make some adjustments there. So I'm encouraged by the progress that's being made in examining perhaps a new location.
Any hints at this point on where you're looking?
Well,
I mean, do you want to be close to where it is?
I think City Hall being in the core business district, in the central business district, that's symbolic. It is symbolic over time in history. It's always been a City Hall, a government center, is always in a forward-thinking city, and one that has a history like ours. It's always been in the center.
Does the Harold Leader building count as being in the center of the city? That was one
well,
of the
actually,
places
that's
mentioned.
one of the ones that's been mentioned, and one of the sites that might be considered.
Before you would, of course, move somewhere, you'd have to do quite a bit of study that I think would take some money to do that, right? To determine if you were going to upfit a building or raise and build a new facility. Would you think it is more likely that you would be building a new City Hall or renovating an existing building? I think
that it may be a mix of the two. If we go on to Main Street and property that the city already owns, then it might be renovations, and it may be some new building, in order to get the space that the city actually needs.
With Lexington Mayor Jim Gray, we're going to talk about the new Senior Citizen Center, the old courthouse, the renovations going on there, and what might a Trump administration mean for Lexington. That and the holiday events that's still coming up on WKYT's Kentucky Newsmakers. Welcome back. It's Kentucky Newsmakers on WKYT, and we're glad you're with us. WKYT Chief Meteorologist Chris Bailey will be along in a few minutes. He's going to talk about his winter outlook. Always something, Mayor Jim Gray, that mayors have to keep an eye on, right?
Something that we are very tuned into, Bill.
How prepared are you in the city for potentially tough weather?
Yeah, I always have good conversations with Albert Miller about this time of the year. Albert is our superintendent, I say, for streets and roads, and he's the guy that is responsible for our snow removal and our cleanup. And Albert is irrepressibly optimistic. I'll put it that way.
You tried to make some changes last year, and then we got two sort of like 18-inch snows there late in the season. That's just almost overwhelming to any community, isn't it?
Well, it can be, but we really are very well prepared, and we've been expanding our snow removal activities to some extent. We got to be careful about that because it's always going to be more costly, but people really appreciate it, and businesses really appreciate it when they can get back to work.
With the change of the administration in Washington, do you think President-elect Trump's issue emphasis will have any impact on Lexington? Can you see avenues of opportunity potentially for the city?
Well, I think that his focus on infrastructure may have some real opportunities for cities. Cities and states across the country, we're almost $1 trillion behind in our infrastructure investment in this country. And if President-elect Trump stays to his commitment, his campaign commitment to put an emphasis on infrastructure and rebuilding our nation's infrastructure, then it could be very beneficial to cities.
Does something stand out to you that if money fell from the sky or from Washington, that you would put a high priority on as far as an infrastructural project here?
Well, I think we can always improve our transportation system, and that means our streets and our roads. That affects every neighborhood. I've learned every neighborhood is affected, and we know that traffic is a congestion issue in our city. It's a traffic congestion is an issue in every city, and some people will say, well, you know, who are living in Lexington today and lived in Chicago before, they'll say, well, you know, it's nothing like, congestion is nothing like it is in Chicago or nothing like it is in other major cities, but still, nevertheless, it's a problem, it's a challenge, and we can always make improvements, and this is where I'd look to making improvements.
Coming off that statewide run, is it pie in the sky to dream of like light rail or some other, you know, kind of intercity connections within Kentucky?
Well, I think if you look at a major infrastructure investment, then light rail would be something to consider, absolutely. But that would have to come at the federal level, that level of investment. That's the way it's being conducted in other major countries around the world, like China, for example, where literally hundreds of billions of dollars and arguably trillions have been invested in rail transportation.
New Senior Citizen Center is open in Lexington, and it's bringing new interest, it sounds like, from those in their golden years.
Absolutely. The new Senior Citizen Center is open, and it's doing really well. The director, Christy Stambaugh, has told me that we've got more than 1,000 new members at the Senior Citizen Center, and it's a really outstanding facility. And I think we're all very proud of it.
The old courthouse renovations continue at pace. You can now see that visibly when you're going through. What is the end plan there?
Well, that's an example of a public-private partnership where the private sector, through tax credits, is involved in a very meaningful way in this project. So we were very creative in putting together the financing for this project. Yes, there's some city funds involved, and there's the private sector funds involved as well. But it's going to be I think it's going to be an exciting piece of renovation, restored architecture for a city. You know, it's got really extraordinary bones. It's featured on almost the Chamber of Commerce, Commerce Lexington features it, and other institutions feature it. So it's going to be exciting.
But Mayor, what's going to be there?
Well, what's going to be there is going to be the Lexington, the Convention and Visitors Bureau. It's going to be the sort of the visitor center for the city. That's what I think is exciting. The Breeders' Cup, I'm not sure whether negotiations have been concluded with Breeders' Cup, but their offices are going to be there. Wonderful event space in the top. So it's going to be an exciting space.
Homelessness continues to be an issue in the community, but the Lexington Board of Realtors in this area have put forth some grants, and there's some effort going on there.
Yeah, really a remarkable story there, Bill. More than 83 people, 51 families have been housed through grants, really modest grants, which are paying for the first month's rent, the advance rent. This is often the toughest piece for a family to put together, that first month's deposit. And these grants, modest amount. The homelessness office contributed $10,000 for the first grant, and that has contributed to the 51 families being housed. And out of those 51, 49 are still in that housing that they were presented with, that they were offered, or that they achieved, that they got. So this is an example of where modest amount of funding really and the Lexington Board of Realtors is a commitment of $15,000. So a modest amount of funding is doing a really extraordinary, created extraordinary results.
Getting people over that hurdle.
Yes.
You like downtown, I know, and you love it during the holidays. And of course, the Christmas tree lighting was over this weekend, and the Christmas parade is still to come.
Right. Well, I often say that downtown is everybody's neighborhood and a part of the city in a very meaningful way. And yeah, we had the Christmas tree lighting on Saturday night, and we'll have the parade on December the 6th.
On Tuesday evening, right?
That's it.
Why is that on a weeknight, by the way?
Well, I get that question every year, and it's part of the Downtown Lexington Corporation's decision making, and they put it there. They think that it's the right time to do it.
Yeah. Some said that it has the bands also.
Well, that is a big piece of it. That's right.
To get on that night. Mayor, thank you, and happy holidays to you. Merry Christmas, which is upcoming. We appreciate you being here.
Thanks so much, Bill.
All right. Hope you'll keep it here now. We're going to be talking with WKYT Chief Meteorologist Chris Bailey about his winter weather forecast before we go on Kentucky Newsmakers. Welcome back to WKYT's Kentucky Newsmakers, and here we are in the First Alert Weather Center with WKYT First Alert Chief Meteorologist Chris Bailey. Going to talk about his winter weather outlook, which is always interesting. He always reaches some conclusions about what's likely to happen based on what is happening, and it is kind of we're here in your humble abode, right?
Yeah, you are. Welcome, by the way. Welcome in.
Yeah.
You get to be behind the desk instead of over here watching in front of it.
All right, so I'm always curious about how you come up with this winter weather outlook. We're coming off a dry spell. Right. Is that a factor?
Yeah. Here's one of the things I look at. I start to really check the patterns locally, Bill, starting in September and really into August. And that's when we're wrapping up summer. We wrapped up summer on a very wet note. This was the third straight wetter than normal summer here in Kentucky. Then all of a sudden we hit Labor Day. What happened? We turned the faucet off.
Dried up.
So we've had a drought for the fall. I mean, if you're going to get a drought in a year, the fall is the best time to have it, obviously, because the growing season is coming to an end. But I haven't found too many years in past where we had such a wet summer that was followed immediately by a drought of a fall. So I had to start looking on a broader scale to kind of figure out what the overall driving weather factors are. And some of that goes all the way out in the Pacific Ocean.
Wow. Is that this weak La Nina?
That is. Weak La Nina here. Last year we had what is something that was known as a El Nino. It was powerful. That was much warmer than water, much warmer than normal waters out there across the equatorial Pacific. This year, Bill, those waters that were much above normal last year are a little colder than normal right now, and that leads to the potential for other factors to kind of figure into the pattern, such as warm water south of Alaska. That same warm pool, by the way, has been there the past 3 years when we've had some decent winters across the eastern part of the country and some history-making winters here in Kentucky. Now we throw in a big area of high pressure into eastern Canada, kind of blocks the pattern up. So those two may have much more of an influence now than what we have out in the equatorial waters of the Pacific. And what that tends to do, Bill, you tend to get more cold air that is trapped under Canada. So Canada this winter will likely average warmer than normal, while the United States averages a little colder than normal. But you got to remember, normal in Canada is still plenty cold, right?
So the effect on Kentucky is?
Yeah, the effect that I see taking shape as we go through the wintertime. Take a look at this map. I mentioned the fact that we're going to see the colder than normal weather across the eastern part of the country. That is likely to include right here in Kentucky. Now, I'm skewing the winter more toward the first half of the winter in terms of being a lot colder. I think we break towards spring a little earlier this year, kind of bucking the trend over the past 3 or 4 years. So the average temperature only a degree or two below normal, but the snowfall should be normal to above. Now, Bill, you mentioned the dry and the warm fall. That has led to the Great Lakes being so much above normal in terms of the water temperatures there. What just happened this week into parts of New York where they had those massive lake effect snows?
Right.
You had cold air coming across the Great Lakes over that warm lake water. It picks up moisture, and that enhances snows downstream. So anytime this year we get a northwesterly flow, that's really going to add up with snow across the Ohio Valley and the Appalachian Mountains.
So potentially some big snows.
Yeah, on that northwesterly flow, I think without question. Now, are we going to have it 3 years in a row to where we have the monster snowstorm?
Yeah.
Odds strongly say no. All right.
I know you also said something that is really frightening or chilling around here about the potential for an ice event.
That's the bold prediction for the year on the possibility that we get a significant ice event. Several of the years that I look back on that I found to be a little similar to this year had a significant ice event. When that happens, I don't know. Obviously, we're talking about a 3 or 4 month span. I hope that it is wrong this year, but that is the bold prediction. And here, you can look at that graphically right now, and we can show you how temperatures by the end of February should be turning milder with smaller snowfall chances. But that bold prediction, Bill, will include the possibility of a significant ice event.
Well, there's the problem when we were riding that line right around 32 degrees.
And
right?
that seems to be a common factor in Kentucky in a normal winter time. The past 3 years have not been normal. This year may be a little closer to a normal winter, but skewed still a little colder and snowier.
We've long been that border state in more ways than one.
Boy, we sure are, aren't we? And it seems like the Kentucky River is the dividing line in Kentucky. Huh?
Oftentimes.
Yeah.
Meteorologist Chris Bailey, thank you so much.
Thank you,
appreciate it. Very interesting. We want to thank you for joining us for this edition of Kentucky Newsmakers. I'll see you bright and early this week on WKYT This Morning. That's at 4:30 a.m. when he used to work with us.
I'm sleeping.
You can join Chris starting at 4 in the afternoon,
right.
right? So we cover both shifts. We hope you make it a good week ahead.